For more than 100 years, the Golden Horde was the absolute master of Eastern Europe. Their armies were a storm nobody could survive, a force that had brought princes and kings to their knees from the plains of Hungary to the walls of Moscow. The Rus principalities all paid tribute, their rulers making the long journey to the capital of Serai just to bow before the Khan, knowing their very lives depended on his mood. This was just the way the world worked, a reality carved in stone by the heirs of Genghis Khan. But in 1362, that unstoppable force was shattered. And not by some rival empire or a grand Christian crusade, but by a rising power from the forests of the north, a pagan duchy that was about to carve its own empire right out of the Horde's backyard. This is the story of a battle that has been almost completely lost to history, but one that changed the fate of a continent, the Battle of Blue Waters. So, how was this incredible upset even possible? Well, to understand that, you have to look east. By 1359, the Golden Horde was an empire literally eating itself alive. After Khan Berdi Beg died, the last direct descendant of Batu Khan, the Horde fell into a bloody, two-decade civil war known as the Great Troubles. Ambitious generals and distant cousins were all fighting for the throne, tearing the once unbeatable Khanate into warring pieces. Warlords like Mamai carved out their own territories, and just staying alive in the capital of Serai became a deadly political game. For the Rus princes who were supposed to travel there for the Khan's blessing, the journey became so dangerous that many just stopped going. The storm was weakening, its energy fizzling out into internal chaos. And while the Vultures were circling inside the Horde, another power was watching from the deep, dark forests to the northwest, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Now, this wasn't a kingdom like you might picture in medieval Europe. It was a huge, multi-ethnic, and still mostly pagan state, built through smart conquests and even smarter politics. It was ruled by two brothers in a partnership that worked almost perfectly, Kęstutis, who held the western border against the endless crusades of the Teutonic Knights, and the Grand Duke Algirdas, who was looking east. Algirdas was a master strategist. He was a ruler who saw massive opportunity in the chaos of his neighbors. His goal was nothing short of audacious. The entire Rus, he said, should belong to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. For years, he'd been patiently expanding his influence, snapping up smaller principalities like Chernigov and Bryansk. He could see that the Rus lands, especially the rich plains of modern-day Ukraine, were ripe for the picking. The city of Kiev, the ancient mother of Rus cities, was sort of under Lithuanian control but was still forced to pay that humiliating tribute to the Tartars. Algirdas decided it was time to break that chain for good. He saw the Horde civil war not just as a moment of weakness, but as a power vacuum that was begging to be filled. In the fall of 1362, Grand Duke Algirdas gathered his army. We think it was a force of about 20,000 to 25,000 men, a serious host made up of pagan Lithuanian warriors, his Orthodox Ruthenian subjects, and the personal armies of his fiercely loyal nephews. This wasn't some quick raid. This was an army of conquest, marching south to grab the lands of Podolia and finalize the takeover of Kiev, bringing them fully into his Grand Duchy. His campaign was fast and brutal. He pushed down through the sparsely populated southern lands known as the Wild Fields, territory the Tartars had always considered their own. Of course, news of this invasion reached the local Tartar governors. While the Horde's best heavy cavalry was tied up in the civil war far to the east, three local Tartar leaders, chronicles named them Kutlubu, Kochubay, and a third, who was probably a Rus vassal named Dimitro, scrambled their forces to meet him. They pulled together an army of maybe 20,000 warriors, almost all of them the light horse archers that had been the terror of Europe for a century. They had every reason to be confident. Their tactics were legendary. They'd harass, surround, and exhaust the slower Lithuanian army with wave after wave of arrows, refusing to get into a real fight until their enemy was broken and demoralized. It was a strategy that had almost never failed. But Algirdas wasn't some Western king who'd never seen steppe warfare before. He knew exactly what was coming. The two armies finally met on the banks of the Sinuka River, a name that literally means blue waters. The stage was set for a clash that would change who held power in Eastern Europe. The Battle of Blue Waters is one of those forgotten turning points in history, and these are the stories we are dedicated to uncovering. If you think these histories deserve to be told, think about supporting our work on Patreon. You'll get early access to videos and help us keep our mission going. Now, back to the battle that broke the Horde. As the sun came up over the steppe, the Tartar army spread out in its classic formation, a long, flowing line of horse archers, ready to swarm their enemy from all sides. They expected the Lithuanians to ball up into a dense, defensive square, making themselves a perfect static target for their arrows. But Algirdas wasn't playing their game. Instead, he did something they never saw coming. He split his army into 6 separate divisions and arranged them in a huge semicircle, almost like a crescent moon. In the center, he put his toughest infantry, a solid wall of shields and spears. On the wings, ready to spring, were his cavalry and deadly crossbow units, commanded by his nephews. This formation was a stroke of genius. The crescent shape made the classic Tartar encirclement impossible. The horse archers just couldn't get around the flanks to do their worst damage. The battle kicked off just like the Tartars thought it would. Their light cavalry charged forward, letting loose huge clouds of arrows, trying to sow chaos on the Lithuanian flanks. But instead of panic, the arrows just thudded into a disciplined wall of shields. The infantry stood their ground, taking the hits with almost no losses. The classic Tartar opening move, the one meant to break an army's spirit before the fight even really started, wasn't working. Frustrated, the Tartar commanders watched as the Lithuanians started to advance. The wall of infantry marched forward slowly, a relentless tide of steel, forcing the horse archers to keep backing up. Seeing his enemy's main weapon completely neutralized, Algirdas gave the order he'd been waiting for. From both ends of the crescent, the Lithuanian heavy cavalry and crossbowmen charged. They smashed into the now disorganized Tartar flanks. The crossbows, which had better range and power, punched right through the light Tartar armor. At the same time, the lances of the heavy knights crashed into horsemen who were totally unprepared for a head-on fight. All of a sudden, the battle went from a long-distance skirmish to a brutal, close-quarters slugfest, the one kind of fight the light Tartar cavalry could never win. Their formation shattered. Their speed, which was their greatest strength, was now useless as they were pinned against the river. Panic took over, and the retreat became a slaughter. The disciplined Lithuanians cut down the fleeing Tartars. All 3 commanders, including Kutlubu, were killed in the chaos. It was said the blue waters of the Sinuka River ran red that day, and on that field, the myth of Tartar invincibility drowned. The victory was absolute. In one battle, Algirdas had wiped out the local Tartar leadership and smashed their military power in the region. The results were immediate. He marched straight to Kiev and installed his son, Vladimir, as its prince, not as a vassal who paid tribute, but as a governor for the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. He handed over the vast lands of Podolia to his nephews, the heroes of the battle, who immediately started building forts to defend against any future Tartar raids. With this one campaign, the borders of Lithuania shot southwards, stretching all the way to the Black Sea. For the first time in over 100 years, the heartland of the old Kievan Rus was free from the Tartar yoke. This victory completely transformed the Grand Duchy. It wasn't just some northern forest kingdom anymore, it was a sprawling empire, a major European power, and now a direct rival to the growing Grand Duchy of Moscow. The win at Blue Water set the stage for a centuries-long rivalry between Lithuania and Moscow over who would be the true heir to the legacy of the Rus. So why is a battle this important, a victory that broke the Golden Horde stranglehold on a huge piece of Europe, so often forgotten? Why does a later fight, like the Battle of Kulikovo, get all the attention? Well, part of it is a lack of good sources. The Lithuanians back then didn't write a lot of history, they let their swords do the talking, and swords don't keep records. A lot of what we know comes from chronicles written much later, often with a political spin to back up Lithuania's claim to the very lands they won at Blue Waters. On top of that, regional politics have muddied the waters. Russian historians, naturally, wanted to play up Moscow's own victory at Kulikovo. Polish historians didn't have much reason to glorify a victory that made their rival, Lithuania, even stronger. But being obscure doesn't make it any less important. The Battle of Blue Waters was a critical moment. It was the beginning of the end for Mongol rule in Eastern Europe. It proved that the Horde wasn't some unstoppable force of nature, but a power that could be fought and beaten. Grand Duke Algirdas, the pagan ruler from the north, saw his moment, and with brilliant tactics, he redrew the map of a continent. He built an empire that would decide the fate of Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine for centuries, a forgotten triumph whose impact can still be felt in the history of Eastern Europe. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a forgotten corner of military history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the battles that shaped our world. And let us know in the comments, what other overlooked battle do you think deserves its own documentary? Thanks for watching.